All right. Let's now move on to one example together. Okay, let me just switch back to the slides to see if there's anything else I want to say. Okay, so that's about the methods I just went over quickly with you, but you should really explore yourself and then maybe look at the API page to explore yourself, other methods, and also maybe to look at this extra tutorial video, okay, just for extra understanding. All right, so that's the example code I would like to go over to with you. So I would highly encourage you to really type out this fragment of code into Eclipse and try them out. And also feel free to write JUnit test cases accordingly as well. If you got any trouble, let me know. Okay, before I go over this fragment of code, I would like to show to you one more reference over here. So if you go back to the earlier lecture, remember when I discussed the classes and objects about data types. Let me show you this particular page. Okay, so if you go to 331, okay, let me just first of all go to the slides over here. And if I go to Java data types 331 over here, okay. So this is the part I skipped previously, but now you will be able to actually look at that. So now the attributes over here, points, rather than being a primitive array, I can simply rather than points and then square brackets, I simply say it's an array list of points. You can see in this case we are instantiating the generic parameter e by points. So that means for this particular case, every occurrence of e would be actually replaced by just point instead, right? Rather than person. So what e should be instantiated into really depends on how you do the declaration for the array list objects. All right. So for this particular fragment of code, I'll let you study that. So once they should be rather straightforward about using the for loop and also calling the methods, which we're gonna illustrate using another example, right? I'll leave that to your study. Okay, it will be required. All right, let me now move this away. Okay, let me just now go over this fragment of code together with you, and I'll try to visualize the array list being manipulated along the way. Okay, you can also do the Eclipse debugger if you wish, but let me just do it on the paper. So I think that's more efficient for you to understand. Okay, so now let's see this. Let's go line by line. So first line, let's now try to initialize an array list. So this will be the line over here, right? And one thing to note, you can see here the string over here is instantiating the e over here by string. So now that means whenever I want to add something to the list, so e should be a string rather as opposed to person, right? You can see now we're just creating another list over here, right? Even though it's called list, but just happen to have the same name, so don't worry too much about it. All right, so now let me just remind you over here, string over here instantiating generic parameter e by string. And for example, so now you used to have in the method summary API, you used to have add EE, right? Let me just do that explicitly for you. You can see void add and also EE. That's what you will see in the method summary. So now in this case, since we instantiated by string, so that means E here will be simply a string. Meaning that if you want to add something into the list, into this particular list, it must be a string. If you try other incompatible type, it's going to be a compilation error. You can try that. All right. Okay, so now let's try to see exactly how we can visualize it. So let's initially we simply create a list that's actually empty, right? By using the constructor that's with empty parameters. So let me visualize over here. So you can think about a list. Simply store the address of some array list. Initially, it's simply just empty. Okay, nothing there. I'll just put a vertical bar over here. Okay, it's not null, but just empty. So the size of that will just be 0, right? Okay, what about contains A? Does it contain A? No, it does not. So it's going to be false. However, what about the index of A? That's kind of interesting. So what should be the index of A, which does not exist in the list? Let's see if the method summary actually tells us what to do. If you go back to the method summary over here, if you look at the index of, right? So whenever you're not so sure about how to use the method return value that's from the Java API, always go back to the documentation for the API, and we should find the answer. So now you can see here, or -1. You can see -1 if the list does not contain the element, right? It's really important for you to look up the documentation, which is what I just did. All right, so now, it would be simply just -1 over here, right? Okay, it's going to be -1. And then the next two lines, we're going to add in two elements. We're going to say add A and also add B. Because we're just doing normal OOP, we have some context object list, which was declared over here, and then we're just invoking methods that are actually made available from the API page. So now we want to add A and B. So what's going to happen is we're going to add one element over here is going to be pointing to the string objects A. And also that will be index 0. I'll do the index in a different color in just a moment. And then we got another second element, which will be storing the address of some string objects B. And for indices, it's going to be starting with 0 and also 1. All right, so far so good. And let's now try to answer some inquiries over here. List that contains A. Does it contain A? Yes, it does. A is exactly here. So that will be true. And then, does it contain B? It does. All right, so that will also be true. Does it contain C? No, it does not, obviously. So that should be false. All right, so far so good. What about the index of A? The index of A apparently is going to be 0 here. And index of B should be 1 over here. Index of A should be 0. Index of B should be 1. What about index of C? C does not exist, and we said already it should be -1. So let me put -1 over here. And then let's say we want to add another element over here at a particular index. Let me just highlight it quickly. Let me highlight it here. We say list.add index 1 and then C. However, index 1 is already actually occupied over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to somehow shift the entire, so we're basically going to shift from this particular element to the right. And then I'll have some empty slot for C to be inserted into index 1. That's what we're going to do. Okay. So the best way to visualize this would be like this. So you can think about what we're going to do is this. Let's say we're going to use pink over here. What's going to happen is you can think about, since we're going to actually going to add a new elements. So there should be another new cell over here, a new slot over here, and then so this element over here, rather than so B will be actually just be shifted to the right by 1 position. So B will become over here. So that'll be index 2. And then the one we want to insert into will be C at index 1. So at index 1, rather than B, is actually now going to be C. So that's what's happening over here. Right? Hopefully you can see that. However, there might be some complications if, let's say originally, let me just undo this quickly. If you actually got something like this. If originally, let's say you simply got, let's say index 1, and also you got index 2, index 3, and index 4. How do you actually insert C at index 1? In that case, what you got to do is you have to somehow copy this element here into here, and copy this element over here into here. You got to shift everything to the right by 1 position. Right? That's something you might be worth trying as well. But I think just doing the example for just one element, only one element to be shifted to the right should be enough for your understanding, right? Let me just undo it. Okay, you can see we shift that to the right, and also we replace the original index 1, which is intended for insertion, by the element C. All right, so now after this, let's check it quickly. So now, does it contain A? It still contains A for sure. I'll say T for sure, true. Does it contain B? Indeed, it does. Does it contain C? Yes, indeed. Index 1, more specifically, right? And now, what should be the index of A? So index of A, so now should still be 0. You can see it's still here. And what about index of B? So the index of B has been shifted to the right. So now it should be 2 rather than the original 1, right? And also index of C should now be actually just 1, right? It's being inserted to index 1 over here. It's really important to see this. All right, so now we want to remove C. Okay, how do we remove? Let's now just use another color over here. So now we want to say list.remove C. And if you go back to remove over here, we set that for the remove, and we are now calling this version here because that one is expecting an integer. We're calling this one here. That one is going to remove the first occurrence of the elements. Now, right now, how many occurrences do we have for C? We got actually just 1 occurrence over here, right? So what we will do is we're going to remove the first and only occurrence of C. So what we're going to do is, let me just try to do this. Let me use a blue over here. So once we remove the C, what's going to happen is, conceptually, we're going to do this, right? There's something already explained to you. So now if I remove this, and then this will be re-indexed into 1. That's what we will do. And of course, C, you can think about conceptually, that's also gone, right? Conceptually. So now after this, we can try with more checks. Does it contain A? It still does. True. Does it contain B? It does at index 1. And also, does it contain C? Not anymore. That should be false. But you can see C has been removed already, right? Due to this particular method call. And then, what will be the index of A? Index of A should still be 0. What will be the index of B? Index of B should actually shifted back to the left, right, by 1 position. So now it's 1 again. What about the index of C? So C has been removed already. So now it will be -1. All right. All right. So finally, let's look at how you can write a loop to go over every element in the array list. So there are 2 different ways to do it. Either you can use a normal ordinary for loop that you're familiar with, which I'm going to go over with you. There's another way to do it by using the so-called for each loop. You can look at the extra tutorial video. I just showed to you the reference, the link. You can look at that if you're interested. All right, so now how can we do it? Because we know the indices will start with 0, pretty much like a normal array. That's exactly what we're going to do. So the important thing for you to see is the upper bound over here for the loop counter will just be I less than list.size and calling this particular method here. And analogous to if you say I is strictly less than a.length, just the same idea. And then inside which you will simply say list.get. So it's analogous to a at index I. How we use a loop to go over every element in the array, right? All right, so that's a very quick walkthrough about how you can use the array list. So I just show you the most commonly used methods. You can definitely explore more methods if you wish. If we ever want to ask you about questions related to array list, we will give to you the relevant API, or you can just look it up on the internet for the API page. All right, so that's about case study number 2. Let's now move on to the last case study for hash map, hash table.